You're listening to From the Chair, and I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Join us each episode as we talk to athletic directors from across America. We're going to talk about topics like leadership, career development, issues of the day, and I can promise you we're going to have some fun along the way too. So sit back, listen in, and let's dive in. Let's go. All right, welcome in. Today's episode From the Chair is with Brent Jones, who is the Director of Athletics at Troy University. Brent, thanks for joining me today, bud.
It's a privilege. I'm in honor of being able to actually be on this podcast. All right, Mike?
Well, look, man, I've enjoyed getting to know you these last few years, and I'm glad we get a chance to sit down and visit a little bit and let folks know a little bit more about who you are and what you're doing at Troy. And I know you've got a lot of good things to share. And I'm going to start with, speaking of sharing, right? It's sort of an interesting story. You and I were talking offline. Played collegiate baseball, and you had the unique circumstance of playing Division I, Division II, and Division III, and you played under 6 different head coaches. So how is that even feasible? So I'd like for you to just sort of share that particular, some facts around that particular scenario and how that began to shape who you are now as an athletic director.
Well, thanks for having me on. I will tell you this. My student athlete experience is probably the most unique, or one of the most unique that has ever been told. And it shaped me who I am today. One of my most proudest moments outside of being married, outside of being the father of a 7-year-old and 8-year-old, is that the experience I had in college. And so the sport that I played, college baseball, it's a lot of failure. It's a lot of success. And it teaches you a lot about who you are. And so out of high school, I'm 5'7.5", as most people know. And so I didn't have a ton of Division I offers because of my height. And I just didn't think that should limit the potential that I had. And so because of that, I was really wanting to show people my potential, and obviously had a few Division I offers, and one of those was UNC Asheville. On my high school graduation day, this will date me, Mike, okay? The Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the actual paper, came out and said that Bill Hillier was leaving UNC Asheville to be the head coach at Duke. So no phone call, no email, no text messages, nothing else. Received it in the newspaper. And 2 weeks went by before I actually had a phone call from UNC Asheville to notify me at that time. So it was pretty shock and awe, not knowing what's going on at that point. And we can sort of get back to that and about how that has shaped me. So Mike Roberts, who was the former head coach at UNC, his son Brian Roberts played in the big leagues, was an All-American at South Carolina, and UNC was our interim head coach for a year. So that's my second coach. And then my third coach was Matt Myers, who was the interim head coach. I was redshirted for 1 year, came back the next year, had a great fall, and subsequently was a lot of us transferred out. And so with an interim head coach, you don't know the stability of the program. Found a great home, transferring mid-year to Augusta State, a very, very high, powerful Division II program. Kennesaw State, North Florida, and Columbus State were in our conference at that time, the Peach Belt. They were 3 top 10 programs in the nation. Kennesaw State, North Florida had actually won the national championship, so it was great baseball. Transferred in, having 4 years to be able to play. Was able to start about halfway through the year, led the team in hitting that year. And then my sophomore year, I was hurt, and so only had about 6 at-bats. During that period of time, there's a lot of transition. Augusta State had dropped men's soccer. A lot of us were concerned about dropping some other sports, and so we transferred out. I think it was about 10 or 15 of us transferred out. I had already lost my ability to transfer across, so I had to transfer down. And came back home to Atlanta, Georgia, Oglethorpe University, a great high academic school, Division III program that I played for. Coach Bill Pop, who played East Cobb baseball. And if anybody knows anything about baseball, East Cobb baseball was one of the first travel balls. We won a national championship my junior year. And so to reconnect with him, was able to play for him my junior year. And then my senior year, he left to become the AD as well as a head baseball coach at Reinhardt College. And so during that period of time, if you go back and look at it, I had 3, then I had 5, 6. And so that's how 5 years, 6 head coaches, and a unique experience on the way that I was treated, the way that academics come into play with athletics, and really my vision. At the beginning of it, of my career, I wanted to play for the front of my chest. And at the end of my career, it was really about playing for my name at the back. And
Mm.
not, and what I mean by that is, I was playing for myself. I was playing the love of the sport, and I was getting a great education at the same time with great teammates. And that really transformed me. My last 2 years of college at Oglethorpe University really transformed me into the person I am today from an academic standpoint, from an integrity standpoint, but also from an athletic standpoint.
Mm. I want to ask you 2 or 3 questions from that story, Brent. And let's start with your Asheville experience. And I'm not interested in talking about individuals here. I want to talk about circumstances, right? So, in the circumstance of having, committed to go to a place and the coach leaves, we know that happens in the business, right? And you're a student athlete who's planning to go there, and presumably you're going there for the university, but we all know the reality is many times you're going there for the coach. So
Mm-hmm.
you planning to go to Asheville and play, and then you just alluded to the fact there wasn't any communication. Having the chance to look back on that, but also the experience with just your, the different coaching transitions you've been around in your career. George Southern, Southern Miss, obviously at Troy. You've had a couple coach changes in the last year. What's the right way to communicate that to student athletes? Who should be leading the communication? And let's say that the former coaching staff does have communication with the student athlete, then who next steps in that communication cycle? Is it the AD? Do you wait till the new coach is on board? Just interested in your thoughts, having experienced what you went through.
Well, the void of communication breeds negativity and distrust. And if you know that going into it, and so I will tell you this, I'm able to empathize with every single one of our student athletes. Obviously, we made a change in football this past year. And so instantly, I went and met with our student athletes. We've also gone through changes in baseball, soccer, as well as men's golf. And so, as a leader, you have to know when tough decisions are made that you have to be able to stand up, and then also be able to have empathy for those student athletes, as well as the coaching staff, because everyone wants to win. Everybody's pouring their heart and soul into this. But direct question you had was about communication, and I think it's critically important. And one thing that we did with football is I spoke to the entire team, and told them the process and what I was looking for. And I told them that I've been in your shoes before, and you don't know who's coming. You need to trust me because I've been in there. I've transferred out. That's not what I want for you. We can win here. We can win with you, but it's my job to be able to select the leader that is going to, with you, take us to new levels and new heights. And so because of that, sitting there when I was 18, 23 years old, I know what's going through their mind. Now, again, that was before social media. That was before the transfer portal, name, image, and likeness. So there are different nuances and variances that are there. But at the heart of the matter, it's about caring for our student athletes, putting them first. And that's what I've been able to do with all the different changes that we've had to make at that point. The second part of it is keeping them engaged. So being able to pull 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever that is. Sometimes it's a leadership council in football that you have. Sometimes it's captains in some other sports. And sometimes it might just be juniors or seniors or impact players. But having a direct conversation with them and asking them, what do you want to see? What was your experience like? How can we get better? What are we doing really, really good? And this is not in an open environment with all their other teammates. So they can be direct and as honest as they need to be. And gaining that feedback and that insight, I firmly believe that allows us to be able to be better because I've built a SWOT analysis on what I feel like the program needs. But at the same time, to be able to build that, put that in there together with the candidate profile, I only think insinuates what we're looking for, and it instantly creates immediate buy-in from them. But at the same time, you have to be transparent and you have to be very communicative. So what I do is I've stepped in. We've had certain instances in men's golf, we did not have an interim head coach. We've had it in other places where we did, in soccer as well as in football when I named that. But I will always step in. I believe as the athletic director or the sport administrator needs to step in to be able to stop any void of communication and being direct as honest with the student athletes. And in some cases, that might be having a Zoom with the parents as well, because they're invested in this. Over communicating will always help. Lack of communication will severely impact your process.
That's good stuff, Brent. So one of the things another question related to what you said, you talked about having the three coaches at UNC Asheville over a short period of time, I know that's a tough thing. I experienced it on the other side as an athletic director when we had three coaches in a very short window at Tennessee between Coach Fulmer and Coach Kiffin and Coach Dooley. And so as an administrator, what we tried to do at Tennessee was to develop, consistent messaging from consistent people that were there and going to be there in the department. Did you see that during that time, or what have you learned that informs how? I mean, I don't know that you've had that scenario exactly in your career in administration, but curious is your thoughts on that, the consistency of messaging from administration.
I think consistency, Mike. You've been one of the best ADs around. You've been around it a long time at different schools as well, working your way up, obviously. But consistency is huge, and dependability is another one. And so you have to be very intentional when you become a sport administrator, when you're a leader of an area, when you oversee multiple areas, and then as you progress to this chair, you have to have consistency, but you also have to be very intentional in what you do. And so if you're going to pop into a practice, there are going to be eyes there. And how is that done? And so everything I want to do, I need to be consistent in nature. If that is, I was listening to your podcast with Ryan Ivey, and he talked about if I'm dealing with the women's basketball coach and there's an issue, my next meeting's with the softball coach. That's not fair for me to be aggressive or to be hyper or to be emotional if I'm dealing with that when that's not the issue. You have to have consistency. You have to be present, but at the same time, you have to be very intentional. And so no longer can you sit at the water cooler, and no longer can you, be the gossiper, and hopefully you never are to begin with, but you have to be very intentional with what you've done. And so during these transitions, I was very intentional, especially with football, which is the first one that we made during the season. I was intentional. I was at practice every single one of those days. I met with the coaching staff. I went by. I spoke to every single one of the coaching staffs they're going through the same thing that our head coach went through. They're still coaching for one more week. They don't know what the future is going to be, but yet I'm asking them to be the leaders of our student athletes, and they have the exact same questions. So talking about empathy, talk about communication, talked about dependability, but you have to understand the emotional. Everyone talks about IQ, but as you know, Mike, it's really, it's the EI and the PI. That's what I think separates people. And it's the political intelligence and it's the emotional intelligence. And you have to understand that when you're dealing with different situations. And you have to understand what are some triggers for you. But if you can understand, if you can empathize yourself and put yourself in the student athletes or the coach's role or the assistant coaches, you can understand those triggers and work around them to do it. But I do think that you have to be consistent, you have to be present, and you have to understand that your statue is going to be looked at. And look, there's a lot of times and there's a lot of demands that are being put on athletic directors and athletic administrators. But the biggest thing that we can do is we can show up and we can be present and we can offer support, even in the toughest moments, offering support. I hear from coaches, and again, I wanted to be a coach. Playing college baseball, I wanted to be a coach, and some of the coaches that I worked with are still really great friends of mine. Coach Mike Bianco, head baseball coach at Ole Miss. Rodney Hennon, who has a top 10 RPI team at Georgia Southern. I worked with him for 5 years. Scott Berry, the all-time leadingest coach right now at Southern Miss. And there's countless other ones. But to see how they interacted, to see what they needed, the Todd Munkins of the world, the Jeff Munkins of the world, the Larry Fedoras, the Chip Lindsays, the John Summeralls, the Neil Browns, all those, they're all different. They're all the same. They all need certain things. And as leaders, I feel like we have to be present, but we also have to understand what they want and what they need. And that goes to our student athletes. And there's a lot of time demands that are placed upon us, but we have to make it a priority to get to know our student athletes to the best we can. And they have to know who you are. They can't walk by one day and you're in a suit and go, who's that? That can't happen. Yeah. That's not the modern AD.
Yeah, no doubt, man. So look, you've alluded to a number of things here over the last few minutes that will give an insight to what type of leader you are and the things that you believe in. You started the podcast by sharing a little bit of your own personal student athlete experience and what you learned from that. You've gone just in the last couple of minutes, you've talked about some different coaches that you were able to be around and to watch and learn from. It sounds to me a little bit like you're a student of leadership, and we're all a product of our surroundings, the people that we're around, the things that we do to get better at our job, whether it's through conversation with mentors, peers, reading, et cetera, et cetera. How have you developed your leadership style beyond the things that you've already mentioned over the last few minutes? What do you do daily to get better as a leader?
Well, one is your network. And I learned that a long time ago playing high school basketball. Who you hang out with is going to be just as important as your upbringing, to be quite honest. And so your parents and who you hang out with and who you socialize with. So your network. And so I feel like I have a very strong network of people who will tell me when I'm doing right and tell me when I'm doing wrong. And that's how you have to know. And those are mentors. But, they're mentors, and the age is not that much different, to be quite honest. But they're great friends. But when you can call on someone and say, "Hey, I'm working through this problem. What do you think?" And a lot of those individuals as well. One person that I've had the fortunate ability to be able to work with the two different institutions is Jeremy McLean. And so he is steady Eddie at all times. He's patient. He's understanding. And so he's as good as they can come. But I have a lot of people that I like to rely on, that I'm able to call to get another perspective. And so that's first part of leadership. The second part is you have to be a student. And so what am I doing daily? And so I would tell you this: I read. I am a sensational reader. And that is something that has really transformed once I got into the chair that I needed to be able to do. Where are you getting your information from? Where are you understanding some of these problems that come about? And so I'm a huge history buff. Abraham Lincoln, who I think is not only the greatest president of all time, but is one of the greatest leaders of all time, to be quite honest. And so one of his quotes is, "Leadership is lonely." That sits on my desk here. And so because, you have to understand what someone else is going through. And if there's ways that you can understand it from reading, from leadership, whatever that may be, it is. And so I feel like I have to fill my cup up every day. There's 5 things that really matter to me tremendously in no particular order. That is family, that is health, that is work, that's faith, and it's fun. Those 5 things. And so everything else is sort of out there, but those 5 things really matter. And that last piece of fun, you hope to get that in, right? You really hope to be able to get that in there. But from podcasts to reading to leadership books, from John Gordon, I've read every single book that he's put out there. Damon West, Coffee Bean, he also has others. You have to have people that will pour into you. And that might be phone calls. But I will tell you this: experience learning, I think, is one of the most underrated things that you can do. We talked about emotional intelligence, we talked about IQ, we talked about PI, political intelligence, but experience learning, that's what we are able to hopefully offer with our student athletes. So not only in the classroom, but also on the field, in the community. And so I firmly believe that every day we have different opportunities. In the last 3 years, from crises and pandemics that we've gone through, from financial to as well as, with the coronavirus and COVID-19, you've seen a lot of people and how they've been able to react and learn. And if you have knowledge and you have understanding and you have empathy and you have passion, you can match all those things together. I think that's what's going to make you be the best leader. And to be quite honest, being the best leader is about being the best person you are, the best self. So what is that? That's making sure that you're mentally rested. You make sure that you're eating the right things, that you're working out, that if you're spiritual, that you are with that. And I am. And so in order for me to be the best leader, I have to be the best person. In order for us to be just like a coach, in order for us, the game plan that they've put in, that's why those last 2-3 days are so important, from rest, from working out, whatever that may be. And so I firmly believe that you want lifelong learners in whatever it is. If it's a director role, if it's an assistant AD, associate AD, deputy, whatever that is, you need to be able to continue to be a lifelong learner, whether that leadership as well as your practice. Because Mike, as we've seen the last 3 years, there's shifts that have gone on, from COVID-19 to enrollment issues, to attendance issues, to technology, to name, image, and likeness, to transformational committees, to constitutionals. constitutions possibly being changed. If you do not change and adapt, which I think is one of the most important things from a leadership standpoint, you'll be left behind. And in the process, you will leave your department behind as well.
You know what, Brent? This is awesome. I come for the podcast, stay for the Brent Jones Leadership Series, and next week we'll talk about it's good stuff, man, really good stuff. Hey, I'll tell you this on the reading piece, just to affirm you in that. I do think that's a separator. You know, there are these stats about the number of people in America that don't even read one book a year, and I've always read, but starting in 2015, I had a goal to start reading 50 books a year, and man, it's really, it feeds you, right? I mean, the things that you learn from other people in terms of stretching your experiences. And hey, you're on a college campus, so you're an educator in addition to being a leader. And so the more that you can learn, the more you can teach. And I love what you're doing to grow. Let's switch to a couple of subjects around your role there at Troy specifically. And I'm going to start with Troy, but really your conference, right? So there's some transition going on in your league in the Sun Belt. Tell me a little bit about when you guys first started contemplating that. And I know it came from conference leadership, but there are ADs in the league that are presidents that are very much a part of this. What were your first thoughts? I mean, some of the players, some of the institutions that are a part of this mix. I think the Sun Belt it's already a competitive league, but I think it becomes even more competitive across multiple sports as a result of the changes. I'd like to hear your thoughts sitting there in Troy and what you see on the landscape for you in an expanded Sun Belt conference.
Well, we just talked about experience learning in my, three other institutions that I've had the privilege of working at is Georgia Southern, Ole Miss, and Southern Miss. And so obviously two of those are next year going to be in our conference with Georgia Southern, who is currently in our conference, as well as Southern Miss. But I was one of four director of athletics, as well as there were four CEOs that sat on the expansion committee. And so we went through this. 6 years I spent in Conference USA working at Southern Miss, so I have a great understanding of the landscape of that particular conference, as well as being in the SEC, as well as the Southern Conference, which is where Georgia Southern was at this time. What we wanted to do is we wanted to strengthen the Sun Belt Conference while at the same time not expanding too far geographically, which then also hurts finances at the same time. So we wanted to be able to strengthen our core, strengthen our sports, while at the same time gain like-minded academic as well as athletic institutions. And so when you really look at that, being able to add an Old Dominion, a James Madison, a Marshall, as well as a Southern Miss. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to have added value to the league, not just from a television standpoint, but from a travel standpoint, from a fan base standpoint, from a ticket sales, from an interest standpoint. And if you look, I think, again, from the colleagues that we've had that sat on that committee, as well as the CEOs, and then really with my Chancellor Jack Hawkins Jr., he's been at Troy University for 33 years now. He was the head of the Sun Belt Conference. He was the head CEO during that time of the previous expansion when we added Georgia Southern, App State, Coastal Carolina. And so that was hugely important to be able to rely on him and his wisdom at this time. And so we felt like we really strengthened in numbers, while at the same time you have like-minded institutions. We're not going to be the most resource conference from a TV rights standpoint, but we do think we can be one of the most competitive. Last year we had four teams in the Sun Belt Conference softball be able to receive at-large bids. 3 able to receive at-large bids, with 1 winning it. So we had 4 in there. This year, we're looking at anywhere between 3 to 4 baseball. We have 4 teams in the top 50. We have 2 in the top 25 right now. You've seen what we've been able to do from a football standpoint over the last 3 years. Coastal Carolina recently, App State, Louisiana, Troy in 2017 and 18 as well. And so we feel like it's a very, very competitive league. We're adding 4 institutions that do not add significant travel distance at all, but also it partners up well. And we're able to go to an East-West division now. And so when you really look at the group of 5, the fan interest, the fan travel, and season tickets, as well as single game tickets, it's all about that competitive balance. I think under Commissioner Keith Gill and what he's done for this league has been tremendous.
Yeah. I'm interested, more teams in the region, more competition. It'd be great competition. You came to Troy from Southern Miss when Jeremy came over, and I think you're known in the industry as somewhat of a marketing expert in many ways. And so, what's the narrative around Troy? What's your gotcha when you talk to people in the marketplace about why Troy? You're in a relatively small market, but you've got a great recruiting base there across Georgia and Florida and so on, Alabama and Mississippi. But your fan reach is you're drawing from some rural areas, right? And you guys have done that historically. You've had great crowds. How have you? What would you tell someone when they say why Troy? What's your answer?
I will tell you this: facilities, alignment, people. So facilities. If you look at the campus and you look at athletically, our facilities are top notch. And I'm not talking about just in the Sun Belt, and I'm not talking about just in the state of Alabama. I'm talking about nationally. We're about to embark on a $12.2 million baseball stadium renovation. 8 years ago, we did a $55 million basketball renovation. 3 years ago, we did a $28 million renovation of our north end zone facility. This matches what the university buildings, academic buildings, as well as our athletic buildings. So you look at the facilities that we have. Then you talk about alignment from the university to the board of trustees, to the chancellor, to the AD, to the coaches, to the staff. That has to be there. The two toughest things that I think in intercollegiate athletics is winning and building facilities. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of resources, and it takes the right people to do. Those things go hand in hand together, but it also takes time, resources, energy, and the right people. We have the correct alignment under the leadership of Chancellor Hawkins, who's been here 33 years, to be able to really lean on him anytime there's crisis. And obviously 3 years ago with COVID-19 was one of those. So facilities, alignment, and then it's the people. We have some of the hardest working, most dedicated people that you've seen. But at the same time, we have to work harder. We're in the third smallest community in FBS. And so yet we haven't allowed that to stop us from being second in the conference this past year in football attendance. The year before that, we were first. The year before that, we were first. We just led conference, Sunbelt Conference, in men's and women's basketball attendance for the first time in the history. Tonight, we're going to host Auburn, and we already have a sold-out crowd right now. We try to push the envelope from the fan experience, from the community experience. Our events, I believe, are top-notch, and because of that, that is it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of details that go into that, but we owe that to Troy University. We are the marketing arm of Troy University, the athletic department is, and I want our events to be outstanding. And so whether that is getting a pie in the face, whether that is having a flyover or a parachute come in, or hosting a wedding during a game, whatever it is. And so we've done a lot of different things. And so I want to be able to hire problem solvers, creative problem solutions, right? And so that, whether that be a head coach, whether that be assistant or whatever it is, but marketing, it is in my blood. I love it, but I think it benefits everybody. It benefits the university. It benefits the coaches, the student athletes, the students that go here. And so when we have an event, I want it to be the best event possible. And I'm going to give you an example. We just had our spring game. And so we just hired a really, really good, what I think is an up-and-coming marketing person, Chris Walsh from UCF. And we just had a debriefing about this. And so that day we had a fun run in the morning. Then we had a yard sale for the first time we've ever done, where we sold merchandise. We had a Legends lunch with two of our former coaches, Larry Blakeney, who the field's named after, all-time winningest coach, as well as Chan Gailey, the Super Bowl winner. We had three other players that played in the NFL or the CFL. And so we were able to have that. So that's three events. So we had a fun run that morning, which, by the way, I participated in, which most of my friends, you can see the pictures on social media for that one, okay? So fun run. We had a Legends lunch that was a sold-out crowd. We did the first ever yard sale. Oh, by the way, those funds go back to help our student athletes fund foreign trips. Because one of the things we want to do at Troy University is Every single student athlete, if you're with us for 4 years, we want to be able to take you to a foreign trip. Again, some sports, not all the teams will be able to go over there, but can we do this through our study abroad program? Can we do this through camps and clinics? We want to be able to offer that experience learning. So, but those are 3 events that we did. Then we also had a dedication, a memorial. We also had a kids camp before the game. So now we're up to 5 events. We had our spring game. That was our 6th event. We had a pregame concert. That's our 7th. And then we had a special donor event afterwards. We did 8 events in one day, and all of them went out beautifully. But we owe it to our fans. I want our fans to have the best experience possible. And so it's really events, but it all gets lumped into marketing. And so
Yeah.
marketing is no more important than compliance. And it's no more important than communications. It's no more important than financial services or academics or anything else. That all matters tremendously. It's just one of the things that we're judged on by our fans with attendance and ticket sales. But it's also one thing that you can judge how good your fan base is and how passionate they are is by that level of intensity on social media with students' attendance, those type of things. And we've been very fortunate here at Troy the last 3 years to continue to set attendance records as well as ticket sales records in a lot of our sports.
Sounds to me like your spring weekend needs to be sponsored by an energy drink, and you need to be giving out B12 shots at noon or something, right?
Hey, and you want to talk about the people. And so typically at institutions that we worked at, the external staff handles the events. Well, let me just tell you about the yard sale that we had. We had university personnel help us with this. We had our budget office. We had our compliance office. We had our academic services. It's all in. We talk about One Troy. That's our motto here. That's not just a slogan. That is legitimately our motto. We're all in this together. And again, those proceeds go back to our student athletes, and we want to be able to send them to foreign trips. And so it all goes back to what we originally started the podcast with, which is about the student athlete experience.
Yeah. Man, this has been a great visit, Brent. I do have to end with one question. I think there's probably an informal poll out there somewhere that says you're the best dressed AD in the Sun Belt. Is there any truth to that?
No comment, but if there's a better dressed guy, my wife's got to step up the game. Okay.
I'm just disappointed you didn't have the pocket square in today, you know? Oh, there it is. Okay.
There you go.
Awesome.
There you go.
Hey, I don't normally wear a jacket, but I was intimidated. I usually am just here in a golf shirt or a button down or something like that. But I thought, man, I better at least throw on a jacket for Brent. So, no, look, you look good, and I tell you represent your university well. And I know you said that you got a special assistant, aka your wife, that keeps you looking the right way.
Her degree's in fashion merchandise. She used to work at Belk as well, and so there's a lot of help there. Yes.
I gotcha, man. Well, hey, thanks for joining me. It's been great to catch up, and your seriously the learning that you've had in your own experiences that you've shared with us today from your student athlete experience, and obviously as you continue to grow as an athletic director, will be meaningful to a lot of people that listen to this podcast on a weekly basis. So I appreciate you joining me.
Well, thank you, Mike. And one of those things that I learned from, to be quite honest, it's Chris Del Conte talked about R&D. It's not research and development. It's rip off and duplicate. And so to be able to listen to these podcasts from other leaders, and I'm able to listen to them every morning when I'm working out, and whether it's a leadership or history or whatever that may be. But your podcast is one of 4 that I listen to, because I believe you talked about what is feeding you. This is feeding me. Knowledge, energy. And one thing I would say is leadership is tough. It's lonely, right? That we talked about. We need to make sure that the leaders are feeding themselves correctly, spiritually, but as well as, mentally, physically, health-wise. All those things matter, because at the end of the day, that's what's going to be able to, you have to give your energy, you have to give your enthusiasm, your passion to your department, because I firmly believe as an AD, and I have this, I have all these notes on my phone. An AD is an attitude director, right? That's what that stands for. It's an attitude director. And I feel like if we can get everybody on the bus together, we can really set some really special records, and we're here to serve our student athletes.
Well, I appreciate your comment about the podcast. When this was first started, it was to do a couple things. It was to share thoughts on the industry, thoughts on leadership, humanize the athletic director experience, let folks know that there are people like you in other jobs around the country that are doing things differently, maybe some days and some days the same. So hopefully it's affirming for folks, and you're saying that a little bit in your comments. So I appreciate your comments on that. This is a podcast that folks can listen to across all their audio platforms and can watch it on YouTube. I appreciate Brent's professionalism today. For those of you who may have noticed maybe a little early glitch in our broadcast, we literally had a drop off air for a few minutes, so we had a little production problem. But like a champ, Brent came right back, and we concluded with a number of good thoughts. So again, I thank Brent Jones, the Director of Athletics at Troy University, for joining me today. This is From the Chair. I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. We hope you'll listen this and every Wednesday or wherever you get your podcast. Have a good day.